Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Do witches really worship the devil? What exactly is magic? Is it really possible to control paranormal powers? Well, hello there, and welcome to the 123rd edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Paul, and Ben is going to be a little bit late because he went to the dentist this morning. Mom made an appointment for him, and the dentist happens to be 25 miles away, which in Rhode Island is a very, very long distance. You stay overnight. I joke with people from other states about our distance phobia here, and they think I'm kidding, but I'm not. Anyway, he's my co-host, my son, very proud to say. He will be here shortly. But before we introduce our guest, it's time for our weekly contest question. Marianne Davis from Cincinnati, Ohio, correctly answered last week's question, quote, a headless man supposedly haunts the woods around what Ohio town? The answer, of course, Bellbrook, Ohio. Now, this week's question is, at what long-vanished mill in Rhode Island is the night watchman supposedly still on watch? Now, if you can deal with that, call us locally, 401-766-1240, or from anywhere in the U.S. at 800-449-1240, or write us at eno@onworldwide.com. If Ben or I don't announce a winner during the show, and you still think you have a shot at that, drop a line to Ben at behindtheparanormal.com. The winner gets an autographed copy of my 1998 book, Faces at the Window, which I saw on the internet somebody was calling a classic of the paranormal. Okay, great. I think that's nice. I think today's subject, witchcraft and the Wiccan religion, which, believe it or not, we've never dealt with on this show in 2 years on the air almost, needs a little introduction. Now, I have a confession to make. Maybe not too surprising given my theological education in days of yore. I once believed every bit of nonsense that there is to believe about paganism in general and Wicca in particular, and I actively wrote against it and worked against it. But over the years I've learned that I was dead wrong. While among people of any religion there are always mistakes, extremes, even some unsavory or bloody history, I have found that Wicca, in most of its forms, is among the most pure, most godly, simplest, and most beautiful expressions of human love for the divine. Now, I'm no expert in it. I haven't got any vast experience with it, but this is what I seem to have found, with some rare exceptions. And yet, Wicca has a popular, twisted reputation for everything from kidnapping and human sacrifice to demon worship and sexual excesses, none of which I have found to be true. Now, it's very funny. If you look back at Roman perceptions about Christianity in the 1st and 2nd centuries, that's exactly how they would have characterized it. Spirituality in its many forms has been my life. I've traveled widely, studied many religions formally and informally, and experienced many forms of spirituality. I've known, learned from, and worked with many priests, monks, ministers, rabbis, medicine people, shamans, priestesses, and more. And I must say that the most beautiful spirituality I have ever encountered in my life belonged to a young Wiccan man from Massachusetts who worked in an office and made flutes in his spare time. Now, I was surprised and pleased during our March 13th show to hear Father Bob Bailey, the Roman Catholic priest, paranormal researcher from Rhode Island, say that his demonology group includes a practicing Wiccan. In my own contact with Wicca, I have found it characterized not only by a deep respect for the earth and for all life, but by a profound mutual respect, especially of men for women, something dangerously lacking in society today. So all I ask of our listeners today is to be open-minded and willing to learn, as Ben and I always try to be. Now, at last, to our poor, long-suffering guest. Willow Fae was raised Jewish until age 13 when she began an exploration of other faiths. After spending 15 years in earth-centered traditions, Willow was initiated into Wicca in 2003. She is an original member of the Sisterhood of the Crescent Moon and a founding member of the Daughters of the Rowan Moon. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Some of her co-crafted rituals have been published in Goddess Alive by Michelle Skye. Willow is a Reiki master healer and has studied mediumship, channeling, herbalism, crystal therapy, and many other healing methods. She lives in Maine with her husband and 3 children. And Willow, welcome to the show. Do you have a website?
I don't have a website, no.
Okay, well, we'll let you know if she does at some point in the future. And as Ben would say, Willow, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we're going to turn you up just a little bit here, audio. How's that?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. It sounds like the phone. Well, all right. Let me just remind everybody our call-in numbers today again: 401-766-1240 in the local listening area, 800-449-1240 and anywhere in the USA. Here on WON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com. I'm going to start with Ben's questions. As I don't know if you heard, but he had to go to the dentist and will be a little bit late, so I'll start. Okay. Willow, let's see. Are Wicca and witchcraft the same thing? That's his first question.
Depending on who you ask. There's an old saying that says if you ask any 10 Wiccans about the religion, you'll get 15 different answers.
Exactly.
And it's true. It is witchcraft, many associate with the practice of magic. Wiccans tend to practice magic, but not all Wiccans practice magic, and not everybody who practices magic is Wiccan.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's clear enough, I guess. So essentially, tell me if I'm right or wrong. As I understand it, it is essentially the use of the respect for the earth and the worship of God in the form of the goddess.
Right. Wicca
okay. No, go ahead. You're the guest.
It's a very positive, shamanistic, nature-based religion. Modern-day Wicca has only been around since the 1950s, but it's really based on a belief system and a way of life going back to the pre-Christian traditions, which originated in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. It can be dated back to even Paleolithic times. I mean, it's a new religion with very ancient roots.
Okay, there's a lot of variety, as you say. I'll tell you about a little. Well, they call themselves a circle, and they were in nearby Massachusetts here, and I visited with them on a number of occasions, and there were a couple of Wiccans in the group. There were people who were rediscovering their ancient pagan roots, and there were some Christians in it too who wanted to discover early Christianity in its best forms, and it was very interesting as someone with a theological background to even talk with any of these people. There were a couple of people of Chinese descent who were rediscovering their ancestors, things like this, and it does seem to be very open and very, very tolerant. Why do you think there's such an interest in pagan religions over the last few decades, and especially today?
Well, I think society as a whole, we've been forced back to taking a look at the Earth. What have we done to our planet? So we're going back to a nature-based society, I believe, the green movement. We've realized the Earth is an energy and a power unto herself, and we can't control that, we can't own that, we need to honor that, and we need to revere that. And so it almost forces us to re-examine our values and re-examine our practices. And it's almost like the pendulum swung, so far one way to where, everything was masculine. There was no emphasis or no honor given to women or to the feminine. And now it's swinging back the other way, where there needs to be a balance.
Yeah, that's one thing. One of the first things I noticed about Wicca again, you're the expert, so correct me if I've got it wrong, but I know there are many points of view. Was the respect for the feminine, and it's funny that made me look at some of what I studied in Christianity and Judaism in their many forms, and there are many forms of each one, and that was the notion of the divine feminine, and when you look at it. The Christianity in any Orthodox form is based on the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Well, the Holy Spirit, essentially, especially the biblical references, is feminine, And a lot of the male-dominated, theological thinking will say, oh, my gosh, But I've even had some male theologians admit that that's really true. The characteristics are very feminine, and you can see the continuity among really all religions in that appreciation for the divine feminine, and Wicca really seems to bring that out.
Well, Wicca is really about a balance in all things, not just the masculine, feminine, but there's the give and the take. You're not going to... a true Wiccan isn't just going to take the vegetables from the plant. They're going to ask the plant permission, if that's okay, and then honor it and, give something back to the plant. There's duality in everything.
Yeah. Hey, Ben has arrived. We've...
Yes, I'm alive from the dentist.
And you're not numbed up. That's good.
No.
Be careful if you open that soda. I dropped it in the parking lot.
Good.
Okay. All right. And we're talking with our guest, Willow Fae.
Hello.
And I'm asking your questions. So
great.
We're kind of in the middle. All right.
All right.
Okay.
I'll find it. There it is.
All right, there we go.
All right,
okay. And actually, I'll show you where we are.
Yeah, because...
Right there.
Oh, awesome. Yes. Oh, am I...
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Have at it.
All right. What is Wiccan worship like? Like, can you describe it?
Like, how do we worship?
Yeah.
Typically, we create a ritual. We celebrate 8 Sabbaths, our holidays, which coincide with changes of the seasons, really. And we will cast a circle, which is kind of creating an opening between the worlds, a sacred space that separates us from time, from, it's a circle of protection where everything is sacred. We call in the quarters. We honor the elements of air.
Okay, now a lot of people
water.
wouldn't know what you mean by calling the quarters. You have to... We have a neophyte audience here, so...
We honor all 4 directions. And
north, south, east, and west.
Right, and each direction corresponds with an element. East is air, south is fire, west is water, north is earth. So in our practices, in our circles, we invite in each one of those elements from each direction. Then we'll go in and we invite in the goddess and the god. We call them by different names. Some people will say Lord and Lady, depending on the time of year, or what the ritual is celebrating. We'll call them by different names. And once we have them, everybody is in the circle, we'll raise a power. It can be a meditation, it can be a dance, it can be a chant, and that's when we'll work any magic, if that's what we're going to do. And we, can enact any, ancient practices, any ancient beliefs. If it's a specific holiday, we might reenact the birth of the god coming back, to the light.
Mm-hmm. As in the Isis and Osiris story, things of that kind.
Right, yeah. Right. Then we'll have some cakes and ale. We'll have something to eat. We always include the god and the goddess with our, celebration. They'll have their food, and their drinks set aside for them. And then, we'll thank everybody. And you kind of, whatever you've brought in, you have to let go. So we, say goodbye to the god and goddess, let them go on their way. We go the opposite direction and release all the elements, thanking them for their participation and for their gift. And then we'll open the circle and kind of go on our way. It's very peaceful. It's very playful. It's not what Hollywood would have you say.
Very few things are what Hollywood would have you believe. Take it from one who knows. Do you have any questions so far, Ben?
No.
Okay. There is there's so many stereotypes I wanted to try and strike down today, but it bothers me to think that we've come so far in a society when we like to think we're tolerant, but I just wanted to be honest. But you've had to use a nom de plume because of possible repercussions in your working life. I guess you told me over the phone. That bothers me. Do you feel persecuted that you have to use a a name that's not your legal name in order to protect yourself? Is that? I mean, I just find that very disturbing that you have to do something like that.
It's not so much me. It's really my kids. I moved to Maine from southeastern Mass. And in southeastern Mass, I was out of the broom closet, if you will.
Yeah.
It seemed to be a much more open area where people weren't judging. They weren't, they would ask questions, but nobody heard, in my experience, nobody just heard, oh, Wicca, and that was it.
Yeah, there's a lot of Wiccan activity around here. We're not far from southeastern Mass, as you know, so.
Right.
There was a certain openness.
And, I worked in a metaphysical shop. I worked in a healing environment. So that was my society, that was my community that I was, fully absorbed in. So it was never a question of, how I would be perceived. We have since moved to central Maine in a very small town with very traditional values. So people close to me, if you come in my house, you're going to see, there's crystals, there's symbols, there's, you're going to see there's different ideas here. And if you talk to my kids, you'll, hear their beliefs. But, I have people around me that have never even heard of the Dalai Lama.
Wow, yeah.
So it's ignorance in, its most innocent form. They just don't know. And I do work within the school system, so I haven't quite come out completely where I'm at.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Yeah, don't some Wiccans act as mediums? Because that makes us kind of nervous to the dangers involved.
Yeah, I don't agree with everything that a lot of Wiccans do, so I didn't want, but...
Yeah, just thought...
Yeah, how do you respond to that? I mean, there's a lot of seemingly spiritualism mixed in with this, and that makes us kind of nervous because spiritualists tend to accept everything they hear, and a lot of them tend to trust.
Yeah, Wiccans don't just accept everything they hear. They want to try it out for themselves. And it's very individualized. We don't believe something just because someone told us to. We're going to check with ourselves and see, does this make sense to me? Does this ring true with me? In general, and it's hard to make a blanket statement about all Wiccans, but our ancestors walk among us. The veil between the worlds, which is how we put it, is very thin. So for us to have working relationships with energies beyond what the eye can see is a part of our normal everyday life.
But so there you go. There's the paranormal at work.
It's not paranormal to us. It's how it is. It's very normal.
Well, yeah, it's not paranormal to us either. That's just the word. If we the paranormal is entirely normal. It's daily life. It's behind. It's our history and yeah. So we hear you clearly.
That was the title of my college essay.
Yeah. What was the exact title? I don't remember.
Oh, it was The Paranormal is Normal.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Yep, it's true.
Yep. So, for a Wiccan to communicate with those beyond the veil is very natural. It doesn't necessarily mean that every Wiccan is a psychic or is a medium, just like every medium and psychic is not necessarily Wiccan.
Right.
But to us, it's not a scary concept. We have our holiday of Samhain, which corresponds with Halloween. That's our new year. That's when we see the veil between the worlds is the thinnest.
Yeah, we always wish Happy New Year to Wiccans on November 1st. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, communicating with our ancestors or those loved ones that have gone beyond the veil, it's part of our celebration of that holiday.
Yeah. I've spoken with Wiccans about our particular theories, which are, that there isn't just one veil, so to speak, but many, and many different worlds where everything's just as physical as it is here, a lot of them anyway, and our listeners are familiar with that theory. And Wiccans seem to understand more than some people about what we're talking about. Let's remind everybody our call-in numbers again today.
Yes. All right, our call numbers today are 401-766-1240 in the local listening area and 800-449-1240 from anywhere else in the United States of America.
I think probably the hardest thing a lot of people might find about Wicca is polytheism, and which is the worship of many gods as opposed to monotheism, which most people are used to,
but
the worship of one god.
Monotheism. Anyway.
No, you're right.
Just keep going.
No. That's exactly what I was going to say. Was that in Well, for one thing, it was very difficult in the 1930s and 40s for a lot of scholars to accept the idea that a number of scholars were finding when they were looking at the Sumerian civilization, that originally it looks as though the human race started out as monotheistic and became polytheists later on. In other words, they started out worshiping one god, and all these other gods and godlings and demons and things seem to have come along later. Nobody could really figure that out. And I deal with that a lot in my last book. Now, how would you explain polytheism as Wicca, or as you as a Wiccan approach it, to somebody who doesn't know anything about it? Somebody who's used to going and sitting in a church and worshiping one god.
Well, even if you're of the belief, of one God, and we're all created in God's image, we're masculine and we're feminine. So everybody has within them masculine aspects and feminine aspects. To us, it just makes sense that it takes a male and a female to create.
Yeah. Well, in my last book, Turning Home, the earliest god I could find was and this was explained to me by an Aboriginal elder in Australia, and their culture goes back at least 30,000 years. There are cultures that go back. You can trace some of the Bushmen back 150,000 years. That's a long time, and it's a long tradition. And they will say almost pretty much just that. You have a god seen as a fractal or almost an image of the family, with a father, a mother, and a child who generally is us. And it's utterly simple and utterly beautiful, I think. So I think you seem to be expressing just that ancient idea of God that I heard from them in a very simple way. And I don't know, what else can you say about it? It's just, that seems to be the original God, the primal God that we worship. Then whatever happened, I speculate about later on in the book. But what I'm often very interested in seeing is how many men gravitate toward Wicca and some of the most beautiful spiritualities I've seen, such as that fellow I mentioned earlier, were men who just have rediscovered their love for this female aspect of divinity, for the goddess. I mean, do you find that? I know your group seems to be mostly female, from at least the sound of it. But have you found that lots of men are, if you want to say, returning to the worship of the goddess?
I think they are. I think at this point it's still predominantly female. But the men that I know that are Wiccan, they're not, the stereotype is almost, well, if they're Wiccan, then they're homosexual. And, that's not true. You'll find men from all walks of life that are drawn to the balance of the male and the female. Yeah.
Well, that struck me too. There's so many different kinds of people. One of the stereotypes is that Wiccans are always politically and socially liberal. Well, there are some, I know some, who are, they tend to be a little bit older maybe, parents, who are very politically and socially conservative, and yet are dedicated and devout Wiccans. So, it does seem to attract all kinds of different people.
Wicca is a very individualized religion, and we respect everybody in their own beliefs, and their, whether it be political, spiritual, religious. We're not going to force our beliefs or preach to you our beliefs. We respect everybody and the divinity within each person.
Yeah, that's what I found in this group. We're going to take a commercial break right now. We'll be right back with Willow Fae here on Behind the Paranormal, WOON, 1240 AM. Whatever this is, we got a lot more of it, so stay with us.
New River Press is proud to sponsor tonight's segment of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Benjamin Eno. New River Press offers the best in unusual New Age books. Stand by the side of tonight's host, Paul Eno, as he battles poltergeists and helps suffering souls and families in the critically acclaimed books Faces at the Window and Footsteps in the Attic. Plunge deeper into the paranormal with Paul and learn about its influence on human history, its action in our daily lives, and its ultimate meaning for us in the best-selling Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. Available now from New River Press, publishers of unusual books. Visit newriverpress.com, amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore. And set for release late this year in one of the most unusual books on the subject ever written, Paul gives us Dancing Past the Graveyard, What Ghosts Have to Say About God.
Okay, we're back behind the paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, and our guest today on WON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com is Willow Fae, expert and practitioner of Wicca from the great state of Maine, not too far from us. And we were discussing the spirituality of Wicca, and I wanted to get into a couple of other questions, and I'm sure Ben has questions too, but I wanted to mention there's sort of a paradox that I've kind of found in looking at Wicca, Willow, and that's that Christian spirituality, which I spent many, many years studying in the seminary, always struck me as kind of, shall I say, selfish? I don't know, individualized to the point of selfishness. And I know that's those are fighting words, and I may be wrong. It's only my interpretation. But Wiccan spirituality, which seems to concentrate on the self, seems to be very unselfish in its outcome. I don't know if you know what I mean, but there seems to be a tremendous unity that is created by the kind of spirituality that I've seen among a lot of neo-pagans and a lot of Wiccans in particular, which to me is kind of ironic. I don't know. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't know. Maybe if I'm making myself clear.
I think so. We're a group of healers, predominantly. We believe.
I've seen healings in Wiccan circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah, we believe in love and respect for all beings.
Yeah.
So that we hold ourselves responsible for our actions. We don't have a Bible, but we have the Wiccan Read, which is kind of lengthy, but boils down to 8 simple words. Any harm none, do what you will.
Yeah.
So basically, do what you want, but don't hurt anybody.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the Wiccan Read, or rule, read is an old word for, I believe, for rule, Middle English, is fine as far as it goes, but the thing is that everything and this gets into quantum theology and quantum spirituality, everything we do affects everyone. So I would just add to that a little bit of care and real compassion needs to be utilized, because everything we do affects everybody else. Anyway, be that as it may, people, I guess, have to interpret that as they can. And here's what I really wanted to ask in this second half hour, too. Are Wiccans, more, in your opinion, more likely than other people to have paranormal experiences?
Probably, I would say, because for us, we believe in it. And, what you believe, you perceive. So we might notice things that other people don't notice. We believe in, fairies and, other entities that we can't see. So to see, a ghost walking across the room, to us isn't going to freak us out. We're open to it.
Yeah.
We're open to all the possibilities.
Well, I know, I'm sure you've heard of Cassandra Eason from England, who is a Wiccan and also has written 82 books. How do you do that? And she is a tremendous expert in British folklore and the whole fairy thing. And again, we've discussed fairies on this show, and whenever we do, people write in tremendous numbers of emails saying, well, I had this experience when I was a kid, or my grandmother told me this. And as Ben, I guess, pointed out one time, it's the word fairy that inspires disbelief. The concept itself is... it
just sounds stupid.
Yeah, well,
it's not.
No, but it's not. I mean, it's worth considering. So, Wiccans do seem to get into all those different and mysterious realities that we have. But I don't know, I found plenty of people in our paranormal work who didn't believe and then got hit right between the eyes by a paranormal experience and did. But you're right, it is when you accept the not only the reality of it, but the normality of it, it can become very real to you, and you begin to really experience some interesting things. How about you yourself, if I may ask? Have you yourself had paranormal experiences?
Oh, all the time. We live in a haunted house, which my kids think are fantastic, and I've had to kind of coach them. Okay, you might not want to tell all your friends before they come for a sleepover that the house is haunted.
Interesting. Okay. Now, tell us about your groups. The Rowan, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Rowan.
Rowan.
Yep.
Okay.
Daughters of the Rowan Moon.
All right.
We were all original members of Sisterhood of the Crescent Moon, and that kind of ran its course, and, for no big, dramatic reason, just it ended, and so the three of us decided to start our own sisterhood. We are an egalitarian group. You'll see in Wicca, most people practice, well, not most, but a lot of people practice in covens. Covens tend to consist of up to 13 members, and they have kind of a hierarchy where you've got the priest and the priestess, different levels of initiation, that kind of a structure. We are very egalitarian, and we're eclectic. We don't stick to one particular pantheon. We work with gods and goddesses of wherever we're drawn. We each have our kind of own pantheon that we were drawn to first, and that's our the one we tend to work with the most. But we'll, depending on where we're at in our lives, we'll work with the gods and goddesses that we feel most drawn to their energy at that time. We take turns crafting rituals, leading discussions. We're not a teaching group in the strict sense, but each of us seems to have our own area of expertise, and so we kind of, teach each other.
Okay. Well, I'm going to drop the S-bomb. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to people who tell you that, well, you're all duped and mistaken and you're worshiping Satan?
Okay. Wiccans don't believe in Satan.
I know, right? Right.
We don't have a devil, and we don't believe in heaven and hell. Your hell is your own creation, what you've done for yourself and to yourself. So that's a Christian belief in the devil and in evil and in hell. Mm-hmm. We don't believe that.
Yeah. Well, they might say, well, whether you believe it or not, that's what you're doing. There's very. I know how they argue, and it's
mm-hmm.
you really, it's hard to.
What would you say to that? Okay.
Well, we get the same thing. I mean, we get the same thing because they say, well, if you're. I'm very wary about communicating with entities because we deal mostly with hauntings and quote-unquote ghosts and even poltergeists and all this stuff in our work, and it sometimes gets into UFOs and all. But a lot of especially the hardcore evangelical Christians will say, well, all of you, meaning both you and us, are wrong because it's all just demons. And I think after 40 years of dealing with this, I know a demon when I say, we don't call them demons, we call them parasites. We think they're life forms that simply feed on. It's just part of nature. Nevertheless, one you don't want to get involved with. So I don't know. And again, and I ask the same question of any mediums or what steps do you take to make sure you're not dealing with something that isn't what it says it is, or that is something like this, because there are dangers out there. So I guess, I guess the argument that you don't even believe in these things, at least in the Christian or Jewish sense, is I suppose as good a response as you can make to people who aren't going to take any. It's like, don't bother me with facts.
Well, to us, we believe like attracts like.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm a very loving, open, accepting person. I'm not likely to draw to me a really negative energy.
Mm-hmm.
They're not likely to connect with me.
Mm-hmm.
That said, we still, we surround ourselves with white light. We cleanse energetically the area around ourselves because, not everybody is light and fluffy.
No, that's true. How do you respond to stereotypes such as one runs into in Salem, Mass, where even the police cruisers have, the town seal has a witch riding on a broom, and how do you respond to? Is that helpful or hurtful to what you're trying to accomplish?
A little of both.
Yeah.
It brings it to light, so, it's not so scary, the term, but then it also perpetuates some of the stereotypes of, we're all wearing black and we all have these hats. And if you go into, Lori Cabot has a shop there, and she's wonderful, but she's one of, it's a mixed blessing. She plays into some of the stereotypes. But also there's a big draw, and so it's a teaching opportunity to let people know what it is we really do believe.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Lori, whom I do not know personally, but who has long been a sort of touristy sort of witch or Wicca. I don't even know if she's a Wiccan, but I just, I know, maybe I'm too nice, but there are a couple of stories I could tell you that reinforce what you just said. But anyway, I think personally, I think it probably does more harm than good. I don't know, but again, I'm not a Wiccan, so that's more or less up to you. Why the hostility that is often seen in society and has been for centuries? To you, do you think it's the gender thing? I mean, men feeling threatened, or what?
I don't know why the hostility. We're not hostile.
No, right.
Like, I don't want to pick a fight with the church. Everybody.
Why not? I do all the time.
They're all entitled to their own beliefs, but really the church has done a wonderful job of demonizing us and making us out to be something we're completely not. And so for so many years, that's what people are taught. I think in my experience with a lot of Christians, they don't know why it is they believe what they believe, other than that's what they were taught to believe.
Yeah. What do you think of this? I always think of magic in the Wiccan sense as prayer taken to the next level. Sort of something that to the level where it actually directly influences the environment. And as I say, in Wiccan settings, I have seen 2 healings of what were incurable diseases. People go to the temple at Abydos in Egypt, the temple of Isis, for example, a name that I have found of incredible power in fighting off negative entities, by the way. And people have been healed. I knew one person who was healed of cancer by the water in this temple, which I guess I'm not entirely sure is dedicated to Isis, but within it is a part dedicated to Osiris. And if people can look up the story of Isis and Osiris, it's very actually much like the story of Jesus, and the resurrection, this sort of thing. And I mean, it's like it seems it's a matter of faith and tying into good things. I don't know. I just wondered if you had experiences with healings at all in any of your work.
Well, I'm Wiccan, and I also am a Reiki practitioner, so healing is it's a part of what we do. And your definition of magic is very accurate. To us, there's more available to assist us beyond just what's on this plane. And we typically will send out healing to the whole entire planet. Yeah,
exactly. And one thing I noticed in studying the feminine aspect of God is that people won't let it go. I think that in the early Christian church, there was a lot of argument about the place of Mary, the Blessed Virgin, or the Theotokos, as the Greeks would say, she who gave birth to God in Greek, and what her place was. The people would not let her go. When it comes to Isis in Egypt, I was very moved to read stories of, even to this day, of Muslim women who will bring vegetable offerings to ancient Egyptian renditions of her at various old temples, and they'll say things like, because they want children, because they can get in trouble if they don't have children, and they'll say, I don't know who she is, but she is a good lady, and the prayers work, and I just think that's absolutely beautiful. People, the common people, won't let her go. They never have. I don't think they ever will. And I think your religion is a beautiful expression of that, if I may say.
Thank you.
So, okay, Ben, do you have any friends who are
Wiccan?
Yeah.
I know of people who are Wiccan, but how do I put this? They weren't well accepted by other people. I remember one time this kid was saying, he was like, I want to pray for this kid because, my friend's Wiccan, he's being really stupid right now because Wiccan's, evil. And I was like, what is wrong with you, man? Just because you're afraid of something you don't understand?
Yeah, because of stereotypes.
Actually, I do know one kid, he was Wiccan for a while, but he didn't understand it, and he didn't really get the point of it.
There is some, would you say, spiritual immaturity sometimes.
Yeah, it was more like black magic kind of thing.
Yeah, they want to go in and turn people into newts, but they're not. To put it crudely, but they don't want to learn, what it's all about.
Yeah, but karma got back at him, so.
Yeah.
And I do know a few people that are like that, but for the most part, everybody I know is, well, since this is Rhode Island, almost everybody I know is Catholic, and they're not completely shut off, because not everybody I know is shut off. But, I don't know, take our spirituality.
Yeah.
Most people don't understand it, but they just sort of accept it because I'm a weird kid. And
Acorn doesn't fall too far from the tree.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. But we have, I don't talk a lot about our spirituality on the air.
This is going to sound, weird, but remember senior retreat?
Yeah.
Isn't, laying on of hands kind of a big, thing?
Laying on of hands is pretty much universal in all religions.
Yeah, Do you know, Willow, if laying out of hands is a big thing in Wicca, things with hands?
It is, and we actually, I call it Reiki, and it's very natural. It's, what is your first instinct when you hurt yourself? You put your hand to that spot. Even as children, it's natural. You get hurt, you touch it. And so allowing the healing and the love to come through you and to help and assist somebody else in their healing is very natural.
Yeah, that one time at senior retreat, I ended up convulsing on the floor. That was cool.
Yeah. Well, there are spiritual phenomena that occur, and there are a lot of traditional, Judeo-Christian people would mistrust that sort of thing, but it does happen, and it's a legitimate tradition, and it's a lot older.
Yeah, but this was a Catholic thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I find the Catholics are getting more open to things.
They do. As I say, we had a priest on March 13th who was a Wiccan working with him in his work. Well, they call it demonology, and in their work in the paranormal, and I think that they've come a long way since I started out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, let's hope we got a call. Okay, we have a call here on Behind the Paranormal. Okay. Well, hi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. I'm happy to be here. I'm actually one of Willow's sisters, Sherry.
Oh, great.
Hello.
Nice to have you. Did you have a question for Willow or for us?
I just wanted to. I've just been listening to your show, which I'm very much enjoying, and I wanted to just say that I was raised very strict Catholic, and I went to 12 years of Catholic school, and I just want to express that. I just really feel that I never found any spirituality in the Catholic religion, and I was a little afraid to delve into Wicca because of all the fear. And when you were asking why people kind of persecute Wiccans, I really believe it's about the fear and about the unknown, and people don't tend to investigate Wicca before they chastise it, so to speak. And I have found so much spirituality and so much more of a sisterhood with the girls that I have really grown so much more from that than anything I learned in 12 years of Catholic school.
Mm-hmm. Well, I spent 10 years in seminaries, not all Roman Catholic, but I hear you. In fairness to them, that's the way. You've got a spirituality that is based essentially on what has been come up with by lonely celibates. Okay,
right.
And the spirituality tends, at times, I found to be kind of syrupy and complicated, and you have to talk about everything. And some of the greatest saints, if you want to use the term, from many religions, including Christianity, have said, all you have to do to learn about this stuff is to shut up.
Right.
And to listen to the earth, listen to each other, and just let it go. And that's how you learn, and that's how you get closer to the divine. So I know just what you mean. We don't attack any religion on this show, but on the other hand, you point out what you see. You call it like you see it.
Right.
At the same
what
time.
I felt with Catholicism for me personally was it was giving up my power and just believing what they told me to believe, like Willow had said earlier.
Yeah.
But with this, I felt like in Wicca, I was taking back my power and having personal responsibility and all the energy I was putting out into the world, and in turn, receiving beautiful things back by shifting that thought.
Yeah. Well, I noticed, too, when someone who has been a devout, let's say Roman Catholic or any religion of that Western, tradition, leaves and does so in a reverent manner, in a godly manner, because they feel it's the right thing to do, those who are left behind have trouble dealing with that, because they say, well, you must have some kind of problem. How can you possibly leave? And then when you say, well, I'm growing spiritually, they can't accept it.
Right.
And that's one of the problems, too, and that's happening a lot today. But again, I like to think that the best among...
It depends what generation you're talking about.
Well, that's true, too, Ben, yeah.
Like the newer, like younger generation, like teenagers and stuff, they're more open to things, and it's a lot more liberal than the older people tend to be more conservative. Not in all cases, but in most cases that I've seen, they're more conservative and more like stick to this, the Vatican, blah blah blah. And it's just like, really, you should just open your mind instead of just preaching what everybody else tells you to preach.
I agree.
I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, your heart has to be. At the same time, people need guidance from people with more experience, but those are found in every religion. And again, I don't think God is about religion. It's I don't know. It's something that's beyond it. I don't think. I don't know. I don't want to get too much into this, but I think we really appreciate what you're saying. Did you have any further comments or questions?
No, I think Willow has been saying everything that I believe, so
okay,
she's doing a
excellent.
good job representing all of us.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. We have another caller.
Thanks.
Hi, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Yeah, do you have a question for Rowan or for Rowan? Here I go again.
I just wanted to comment on both of the
for Willow.
last person was talking about.
Yeah.
I was raised Baptist and in a rural area. So I had no contact with Catholicism until later on. And I got curious about it. And at that point, growing up in the time I was growing up, you were either Catholic or Protestant. If you were Christian, was nothing in between. And there wasn't much crossover. So I stayed Protestant. But I began to look into the Catholic religion and its history and everything. And the Catholic religion is the most open-minded religion about other knowledge, like she's talking about Wicca and all that. They're the most open-minded because if you look into their history, many of the alchemists in history have been Catholic. So all this esoteric, I guess they call it esoteric knowledge and things like that, this is all, this has come down, through the Middle Ages and the Catholic Church to us, a lot of it. So, and if you go to a Baptist person and you start talking about anything, maybe it could be a little bit with herbs, or how, say, if you burn sage, you feel better or something, they immediately label you as a witch or something evil.
Even today?
I totally think the Catholic Church is the most open-minded church as far as new knowledge or learning or anything. So, and I'm not one, like I say, I have nothing to gain from saying that because I wasn't brought up that way.
Well, Willow, I don't know.
Turn against the religion,
Yeah, well, as I say, we try to respect all religions on the show here, but Rowan, why do I keep saying Willow? I'm into trees today. Willow, do you have any response to that, or?
That's your opinion, and that's what you've learned in your own search, and I think whatever gives you peace is fine. It may not coincide with my experiences, but that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Well, if you went to a church, what's your name, Rowan?
No, I'm perpetuating a myth here. No, Willow.
Willow.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, Willow, if you went to a church and, was educated by a priest or a, parish or whatever, that doesn't mean that's the whole ball of wax. I mean, for me, looking as an outsider, looking into their history and everything, I think it would do you good to look into the history of people who have been Catholics, who have been like in alchemy and like Sir Isaac Newton and all these other famous people that have done amazing things, that have been Catholic. So it would really do you good to, educate yourself on what the Catholic Church has done.
I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Galileo was executed just for saying that the sun was the center of that the earth was not the center. So, I mean, it depends
and how
who
many witches did the Puritans burn? You know, there was no, you know, you can say good and bad about anybody.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. All right. Well, we're kind of running out of time, but thank you very much for your call.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Willow, I think we're going to have you back because we got a lot going on. Okay, we're going to what do we got left here? Okay, we have 5 minutes left. So, Ben, any final observations or questions before we shut down
I
the
don't want
shop
to say
here?
anything I just don't want to say anything. Something bad may happen.
What do you mean?
Because, like, last time I said something, people were just like, what? And then something will explode, and then bad things will happen.
Well, along about the... Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Ben is a student at a Catholic school and about to graduate. But again, there's a lot of open-mindedness, I think, at your school that I've found.
More or less.
Anyway, okay. Let me give you the last word, Willow. I won't call you Rowling. Let me give you the last word. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Well, I think if you see somebody or you get to talk to somebody and you find out that, you know, they are Wiccan, just ask your questions. We're very open-minded. We don't believe in recruiting. So you'll never see us knocking on your door, you know, telling about our beliefs. But, you know, we're very open to educating and to sharing. And, you know, just try not to believe your stereotypes. We don't believe in the devil. We don't offer blood sacrifice.
Good.
You know, all life
Yep.
is divine, and we have great respect for everybody and their individual belief system.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you for a great show, and we'll be in touch, and we'll do it again.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Willow Fae. Okay. So I guess we'll move on. You've just listened to the first hour of our end of the month Behind the Paranormal Marathon.
Oh, God.
It's a real marathon for us, too. 4 hours of, if you can't get enough of us, on various stations around the country, various networks. So, plan to listen. I want to tell people about our 3-hour special on April 11th. This is going to be a really big show, as Ed Sullivan used to say. We're going to be co-hosting a UFO panel discussion to mark the 30th anniversary of the Bentwaters Air Base incidents of 1980, Britain's Roswell. We'll have UFO greats Nick Pope, Bill Burns from UFO Hunters, Peter Robbins, UFO expert and author, along with John Burroughs and Larry Warren, and turns out, you don't know this yet, Ben,
No.
but Colonel Charles Halt, who was the deputy base commander when all this stuff went down. And these guys, 3 actual witnesses to the incident. 3-hour special, April 11th on CBS. Okay. You can participate by sending in questions in advance to Paul at BehindTheParanormal.com. You can check out our website, BehindTheParanormal.com, for guests and all sorts of good stuff. And our show phone number, again, I just want to remind again, has changed. It is 401-651-7732. It's not a call-in number, just if you want to get in touch with us during the week to tell us about stuff, make suggestions, or whatever. Now, this has been, again, the first show of our 4-hour end-of-the-month marathon. Tomorrow, from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, noon to 2 Pacific, is our monthly 2-hour Internet-only special broadcast, AchieveRadio.com. Our guest will be Freddie Silva, author and expert on mysteries of crop circles and sacred places, a huge and fascinating topic.
On our regular Sunday show, tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, on CBS Radio and www.newskyradio.com, our scheduled guest, UFO great Stanton Friedman, had to reschedule, so my dad and I will take the hour to answer some of our emails, and some of our show field reporters will be calling in.
Okay, and next week on WON 1240 AM, Murray Silver, the great Murray Silver, who...
Let's hope nothing bad happens this time.
All sorts of weird things happen. Was that real controversial? We're talking about ghost hunting in depth and wherever this brilliant Mensa guy will lead us. In the meantime...
Oh, we leave you with this quote from British author William Hale White. Face what you think you believe and you will be surprised.
See you next week.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.